Conversation.
Whatever.
All right. Hello, everybody. As you all know, we are just ending the Scottish Summit, and this is a perfect occasion to visit John. And I would love to introduce John because this is one of the best, the most experienced, unique person throughout the world. You're going to find test managers, and there are practically nobody else. John is the perfect one for delivering test automation, the strategy. Everything what you think of from the security of your testing, that's the perfect place. And thank you so much, John, for having us here.
It's an absolute pleasure.
We are in Loch Lomond for today's day. The venue is beautiful, so we're going to use this place to share with you some ideas, some knowledge, to have some small talk about test automation, about the challenges, about the D365 one version. And yeah, John, welcome.
Yes, thanks.
We actually wanted to ask you to share a bit of how the process of testing looks like whenever you start a new contract. There is nothing going on yet, and you would like to help out with the company delivering test automation. If you're going to walk us through the whole process, how does it look like, typically, how it starts, what are the stages, and yeah, how does it look like?
Yeah, no problem. I'll maybe put a bit of context into my position. So I do contract test management, so I'm fortunate in the sense that I get access to lots of different organisations, different types of organisations. Primarily, I've been working in the D365 space, and therefore been using executive automats for D365. So I normally get brought in to put a test management framework in place. And it covers all of the testing, not just automation. But automation is obviously the in thing now for a lot of organisations. So basically what I do is I come in and assess the program needs. I normally come in once the analysis and design phase is done, so the fits and gaps have been already organised and understood. And we get involved in working with the partners who are implementing D365. So I cover the whole sort of life cycle from that point. Normally I'll be involved in managing the system integration testing and the UAT. But more often now I'm being asked to give views on what the automation test strategy should look like for organisations, and it comes in two different flavours. It comes first of all from the IT department, who are really looking at test automation from the perspective of how they are going to be able to make sure that all of the updates that are coming through from Microsoft don't impact the actual current application. And I work with them quite closely in developing the strategy, and normally that consists of coming up with what they would say is a base regression pack, which will include all of the key business processes for all of the different areas. So you'll have the key business processes for finance, for sales, for procurement, warehousing, transportation, all of that, supply chain management. You'll also then have they're interested in the integration, what executive automats can do for integrations. Now obviously, because executive automats has got the ability to really effectively test anything which is web-based, a lot of the integrations nowadays are web-based. So I was with a client and they would bring in all of the customer data through a web-based application, which would then be automated and brought into D365 through automation as well. So the IT departments are normally really, really keen to get a good automation tool. You then have the business. Now the business are more around what can it do for us. So I want to make sure if this is a finance department, they want to make sure that all of their testing can be done, all of their key business processes, and I keep using the term key because you're not always going to automate every single business process. So for example, there are certain principles that I would be bringing in to that organisation, and that would be things like, how often do you use this? How critical is this business process to your business?
So you would recommend to build like a package of key processes which you do the most, then you run this. How frequently you would recommend to run the test automation on the typical project, like focusing only on those key processes?
Well, if you were doing that, what would not that would be run on a regular basis. So again, it depends on the type of program you're working on. So for example, if it's a global rollout, where you've got many legal entities and you're going to be rolling out a legal entity or more than one legal entity at a time, what they really want to understand is it going to impact what we've already got? So if we've done a pilot, they want to know what happens when we bring in another 2 or 3 legal entities, and they want to understand that from their perspective. To a degree, the business tend to be quite separate from. They seem to be only focused. A lot of them only focus on their area. So finance really will only want to know about how it's going to impact their day-to-day tasks. So what I tend to do in terms of an approach, a strategy around that, is to develop, to sit down with the business units and look at all of the key processes, everything that they do on a daily basis, everything that's absolutely critical. So for example, if a company, if they can't do the invoicing, that's a biggie. If the procurement department cannot raise purchase requisitions or purchase orders, that's a biggie. So these key areas are defined from what would happen if we had a problem there. And what we then do is we collate all of those key business areas, business processes in all of the different business units. We then have to look at the cross-functional element then, because we then need to understand there's a key business process that's going on in the warehousing. How does that impact finance, for example? So the process of building that and then looking at what needs to be automated and what should be automated and what frankly shouldn't be automated. So an example of something that wouldn't be automated would be a process which is periodic, and it doesn't necessarily have any value to create a script, to maintain that script. Running is fine, as you know, because once you actually get the task recording and the script recorded properly, then it is literally a press of a button, as you know. So it's all around these sort of key thought processes as to what is the volume, for example, of this task, this business process, how often do you run it, and that then determines the basis of a regression plan.
Scotland is actually visiting as we have a high winds.
Yeah. So, the wind caught is there. Excuse me. So, once we've established that process, we then go around making it happen. So it's getting the scripts recorded in the correct manner, because as you know, any automation tool, there are little idiosyncrasies that they have. So for example, if you've got a fast tab on a page, and this is where I suppose my experience of using the application in anger becomes a benefit from that, is that simple things like if there's a fast tab that's open when you record it, the application will expect that to be there. But when you run that and that fast tab is shut, it fails. So there's lots of little factors, lots of little things that you get out of actually using it in anger. And I use that example very specifically for a reason, is because that happened in one of my last clients, and I contacted the support from X Plus and said, this is failing, can you look at it? And they basically, and this is what I do like about X Plus, is not just the application really easy to use, it's also the support that you get from the organisation. So they actually got one of the developers to phone me up and discuss the issue, and he basically came up with a solution to that, which would look at, it would do a check to see if a fast tab was open. If it was open, it would be fine. If it wasn't open, it would open it, then it would run the script. So just little things like that will really make the difference. So somebody like myself who goes into different organisations who then in turn ask me to provide some sort of information around test automation, I don't have any issue recommending executive automats and X Plus because I've got the experience. I know the sheer benefit of having that, and I know that the support is there, which is another really important thing.
True. We actually had an experience working from 2016 together, 15,
Yeah.
with different clients. We actually can't tell the names of all of them as we've got some NDAs, but that's true. We tried the best. So thank you so much for those nice words. I would love to come back to what you told us about the testing. You said you are invited in the UAT section where the gaps in the quiz are already done. So would you say like the best place to start the test automation would be the UATs, where the business user told us that the system, the vision, the image of the system is completed, and they are signing off these processes. So now we can start recording test cases to make it automatic, to make the regression pack, or you will start the test automation in the even further phase, or previously before the gaps are defined.
It depends. It actually depends. It's a good question, and it depends on the organisation and the programme. Some of these programmes have got a very high maintenance in terms of their integrations, and that's some of the. For a lot of these companies, integrations is a really important element to their business. So because D365 will feed from or feed to lots of different subsystems. So if that's the case, we really then bring automation in at the system integration phase. So that before we get to UAT, user acceptance testing, we know that we have effectively run that integration as much as we can. And
so even the system is not ready, because we can say that the UAT is the final moment where all the integrations are done. We are practically ready with the final vision of the system.
Yep.
You would recommend when the system is some kind of a plastic mass, still it evolves. It is already good place, positioned to invest the time and the allocations to create some basic regression package.
That's correct, and the way that I view it is you're right, the system is evolving, and it's really the final sort of sign off is when you get to the UAT phase. However, there's a lot of, I look at it from a building block perspective. So yes, the final product's not going to be signed off until UAT, the end of UAT. However, there's a lot of building blocks that we need to get in place. So before we go into UAT, we need to ensure that the integrations are tested. Now, they'll be manually tested, but if there's a heavy reliance on the subsystems, downstream systems or upstream systems, then there's normally a request, from my experience, can we automate this? Because what we want to do is we want to keep running it and running it and running it. We want to run it under load, that type of thing, because this is critical to the overall solution, and we want to do it earlier rather than later. So automation can start earlier than UAT. If I was to look at it from a sort of standard, I would say yes, absolutely. we can utilise UAT actually for, so you can do the automation to support UAT, but you can also use UAT to support automation testing. And again, I was with a client who the business didn't have the time. They wanted automation, but they didn't have the time to help write the scripts or record the scripts. So what we done was we came up with a compromise. And while they were doing their testing for UAT for a pilot, we actually used that as our opportunity to create the recordings for the test automation. So there's no one size fits all here. It depends, but the core of what we're talking about here, and the core in my mind, as a test manager who's ultimately responsible for testing, is that we've got the right tool and we've got the right support. And for me, that's already in place. The methodologies are open, and you can have different types of methodology. You can have different hybrids and different approaches. But generally, for me, the most important thing is the right tool, and the right support, and the right people working with it.
True.
And you'll always end up it will be a success. I've been fortunate in the sense that for every organisation I've been in where we have done regression testing using executive automats, we've been successful, and that's because of the people that have been helping us do that, and it's been the support of yourselves, and it's been the support of the tool itself. So I think overall, I would love to give you a straight answer to your question.
True.
You're not going to get a straight answer. You're going to get a truthful answer.
True.
And it's, as I say, different variations. But if you were to ask me for a sort of recommendation of when you should do it, absolutely. One, do it for UAT. With that exception.
True. Or maybe we're gonna put on the jackets because it's super windy and so yeah. Thank you for sharing regarding the UATs. We definitely agree that the UATs is a perfect moment for starting the test cases creation for mid-size, small-size organizations. If you are running a big multinational project, then we could actually recommend to do it before. And you mentioned one more thing which is very important, I think, multiple legal entities. So when you've got some kind of the same stream of the processes which is visible across the organization, so a few different countries, they can have the same core, but they've got just slight different tax or functional changes. So have you find out throughout the years, is there like some strategy to approach that multi-legal entity to build some like local and global packages?
Yeah, so if it's a large program and it's a large rollout, we would develop a global template. Now the global template is effectively all of the key business processes for the, if you want, the pilot legal entity. But as you say, when you move on to another legal entity, the core of the process is exactly the same, and it's really more around the data. So that's one of the good things that comes out of automation testing, is because you've already created that core, that template, and the core processes are there within the script. Really basically all you're doing is copying the script and making some slight changes to it by changing the legal entity, and also any data sheets that you want to put into it. And again, that's maybe when we're coming down to the sort of nitty-gritty of it all. The way that the automation testing works is the majority of the work is put in to set it up, but once you've done that, it's very easy to maintain it, or it certainly is with executive automats, because you're using data sheets. So the legal entity example is perfect. The only change you would really make is, in fact, what you would then do is you would have the scripts run off of a data sheet of legal entities, and you would also have separate legal entity data sheets as well. So it's very, very easy to put it all together. It's like small building blocks that you build upon. Now the thing is what I've found is I've not just worked in big programs. I worked for small projects, so small companies who are really just bringing in D365 for their own use. It's not a big program; it's a big program of work. For these small to medium organisations, it can be a lot less cumbersome for them because they are not maybe going to be so heavy into the complex subsystems, etc. for integration. They'll really look at it from a UAT perspective, and that's the best time for them then to introduce automation testing and create the scripts off of the back of UAT. They've not got massive complexities. So I think that executive automats from a company perspective or organisation perspective, it covers everything. It covers small, medium and large. It's just the different levels of complexity. But executive automats can handle that.
And regarding the tool set, we can definitely mention also the DevOps, as this is a
yes,
typical
well,
element.
yeah. So literally 90% of all organisations that are introducing something like D365 use Azure DevOps. And Azure DevOps is a key test management tool for the program. So basically, everything will run through that. So you'll have all of the business requirements, and they may be transposed into user stories. You'll have configuration getting done through Azure DevOps. You'll have all of your sort of fits and gaps, etc. You'll also, some organisations or some implementers will do it in sprints, some will do it waterfall, so if they do it in sprints, they'll have their sprints there. And then there's a separate test management unit or section within Azure DevOps, and that's really the area that I work on, although everything is linked. So if you take a simple test management example, would be that you'd set up a test plan in Azure DevOps, and that test plan can consist of a set of test suites, and it could be like business units and then test suites, and then those test suites would be broken down into folders, and you would then start to build your test cases up there. And you would link them back to all of your business processes or your user stories, and as part of the process of building that set of test cases, you're actually then be able to record them and use them for your automation as test scripts. Yes. So in test management speak, when you're talking about Azure DevOps and a manual test plan, it's a test case that you run. But when you're dealing with automation and executive automats, it's a test script. And another cool thing about executive automats is it's fully integrated into Azure DevOps, which is a massive bonus. It really is.
We have a visitor, Swan. I think he also wants to learn about automation.
So you want to learn about automation? Well, listen. So basically, Azure DevOps and Executive Automats integrates into Azure DevOps, which is really, really powerful, because you can then run your automation tests through the scheduler, see what the results are. You can raise a defect if there's an issue, and it goes into Azure DevOps, and it's incredibly powerful to have that facility, because you're then starting off. Mr. Swan's coming round your end now.
Hope he will not bite me.
Yeah, I wouldn't put my hand out there. So overall, the Azure DevOps and the integration with executive automats it's spot on.
True, and I was just thinking, like, distracting one. He's sharing, yeah? Or this is not sharing one. Hopefully, you will not turn into the black swan again.
Excuse me, we're trying to do a video here.
Yeah, so
He's put you off.
yeah, he put me off totally. I had my one thing I wanted to ask you, but yeah, we forgot about our executive autonomous bread to feed him. What I wanted is to. We covered the DevOps integration and we talked about the DFO.
We're talking about the integration with Azure DevOps.
From the perspective of the start of the project, if you would say who is recording the test cases? I mean, one of the problems we see is that when we start talking with company, they are telling us they don't know how to start. They don't have any kind of documentation because it is outdated. It was delivered on the beginning of the implementation. They are in the UAT phases. It is not yet like, they don't have the possibility to record the test cases. So would you say that it is a good statement that we should ask the business users, the key process owners, to record the rough rough test cases, and then who should take the this challenge to put that into regression plans, into the some packages, so smoke test packages? Would it be a test manager?
Yes, so that's the area that would really come under what I do. What would happen is, when I go into a company, I go in with test management experience. I do know obviously basic business processes, but the real experts are the people in the actual company. They understand their business, they understand their business processes. So you're right, there would be something like a process owner. And what normally happens is you get people who are doing the day job in the organisation want to be part of the programme. They become super users or SME. And it's normally those people who would start to create a test case. Now what I do as a test manager, especially for small organisations and medium organisations who don't really have lots and lots of people, lots of resources available, I'll guide them and basically show them the key elements of how you create a test case.
Okay.
And it's not that difficult. And once you've got those guiding principles of how to create a test case, these guys then they then take a template, an Excel template, and they go away and they start to put down all of the key steps in that process, and that becomes the basis of your test case. If you then want to transpose that over to a script, a test script for executive automats, you've then got the test case as your guide to open up the recorder function and start to go through the process. And that is normally then, as I say, it's normally myself. It would be a set of super users who are normally from the business, and if it's technical, it'll be people from the technical side of things. So you get that quite often where you have companies who absolutely 100% know their business off by heart, but they just don't know testing because it's not been introduced to them, and that's why you bring somebody like me in to set that test management framework. Now, at the beginning of our conversation, I mentioned that test management framework. That's part of it. That's taking the business through the training them on how to use Azure DevOps, test management element side of it. How to write a test case. You know, what are the guiding principles of a type, how to write a test case. And I spend time with them actually making that happen. But you find most cases, once the guys or girls get a hold of it, they're away. You know, and before you know it, they're producing high quality test cases because all they're doing is applying those principles and a template to what they do every day. And then you really start to see those test case numbers build up and the quality of them because they're using set principles in terms of like naming conventions, what you should have in a test case, what parts where you would want to put in an expected result, etc. So that's basically a test management role to help organisations have that framework. And then once they've got that, you find that the guys just run with it, and before you know it, they are producing really good quality testing material, which then you put into executive automats, and guess what? The magic happens.
True. Schedule and then do something else. Don't execute the test cases. So actually, that's something we can both agree that you come into an organization, you build some naming convention to name the process, do the UAT, the verification of the users regarding what process they want to convert to the automation. Then you build some packages of test cases. The naming convention also builds some kind of a structure which then helps you build smoke tests or full regression pack. And then, of course, triage and some possible flows, who's responsible for the actual triage. And this is as well the test manager area. One other thing that we had in mind lately is actually a problem on the market that people are testing with system admins. The high role which they actually see into a system without any practical limitations. And they are doing those tests, and then on the real life they're actually operating on very narrow role. So they don't see the potential problem which can come.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. That's always one of the key areas that need to be addressed in a lot of organisations. They'll do testing, as you say, on system admin roles, which can do everything. What we're finding now, or what I'm finding now, is that a lot more organisations are now saying that's fine to a certain point to do the system testing, but once you start to go above that level of testing, you then need to start to do security role-based testing, and that's actually can be quite complex. That's one of the sort of areas that can be quite complex, is the segregation of duties and the testing using the correct roles. Executive Automats does handle that really well, but it requires quite a lot of understanding of what security roles or business roles that the organisation do. And again, the more, I would say, it becomes reversed. The big organisations are normally got very defined roles, which makes it easy for them to have a security role for an invoice clerk or purchase clerk. Whereas when you get to the small companies, it's a lot more complex, for the reason that Mike does umpteen different roles. He doesn't have a single role. So
Yeah.
that is a very good area that you bring up, because it's one of the tougher areas that have to be addressed. And ironically, it's the smaller organisations that have the most trouble.
True.
But what we do then, what we tend to do then, is to get somebody who knows D365 security role as well. Now, if that means that they have to bring that person in, it's worth it for them to do that, and that person will understand the best strategy for that company. So that could be to give multiple roles to an individual and put them into different user groups, etc. That's actually outside of my area. What I mean by that is the creation of the security roles, etc. is way out my
Sure.
understanding.
I mean, that's the team, that's the co-working.
Yeah.
Like this is your part, the test
Yeah.
managing, and then you've got the security consultant and does
Exactly.
the other part of it.
Exactly, but it's a really good point. That that is one of the areas that are now people are starting to understand. I would have said maybe 2-3 years ago, when I was doing implementations of Dynamics, when you mentioned segregation of duties, they would look at you and go, "What do you mean by that?" Whereas now, a lot of the companies that I've been going into are a lot more savvy. There's people that are in that organisation saying, well, we can't use system admin, or the implementer. The implementation partner is normally the one that should come up and say, have you thought about this? So, but you're right, it's a collaboration. I've got a specific role within a program, just the same as a security person has,
Exactly.
business functional consultant, etc. But we all work together. But it's a really good point you bring.
Regarding the, we can talk about the pace of the implementation and testing, because it was a significant pleasure to collaborate, to be partially in your team in AX 2012 in Hungary, where we had the project.
Yeah.
And thinking about AX 2012, if you would say how it actually increases the pace, how faster or how more effective, and how much you have to invest in testing, comparing 2012 to finance and operations. The one version puts you on that hyper pace that you have to be quick, you have to be effective, you have to test. Whereas in 2012 you had that cumulative update number 13, and you can plan it for like a 1.5 year project.
Oh yes, so I was just trying to work out where you were going. No, you're absolutely right. It's night and day. When you were on AX 2012, for example, you could upgrade whenever it suited you.
True.
Whereas now you have a certain time period, and if you don't upgrade by then, Microsoft just go ahead and make the changes. And that was obviously would never mention the client, but the client was in that situation where they had so many features that they hadn't upgraded that it was a sudden panic. Now, they accepted that was something that they had created themselves by not upgrading more often, but the fact is that it made them realise how important it was for them to get ahead of the curve and to get an automation regression pack put in place, so that they could have more confidence in doing the upgrade at the lower level environment, run the regression packs constantly to make sure that everything was okay, address any issues, and then they were going to be ahead of the curve when they had to put it into production. So good point. It is something which nowadays, with the way that Microsoft are working, D365, you don't have time. You have to be pretty well forward planning all the time, because some of the changes you would never notice them. Some of the changes can be quite significant to your business process. You know, so it's really important. And that takes me back to what I was saying there, with a lot of the IT directors and people like that I've dealt with. They were very keen on getting automation because they already knew that this was going to be a problem, and a lot of them are starting to get panicky about the fact that, you know, they haven't got that in place. They haven't done the forward planning. They know that changes will be made if they don't stick to the timetable, and it could have a very serious impact on their business. So again, that for me is just another reason to advocate get your automation testing sorted out, because whereas automation testing years ago used to be pie in the sky, it was something, you know, we just do the testing, end of story. Now it's totally different, and I think it's the evolution of the software and the evolution of businesses. The businesses are getting more complex and getting bigger. The systems are getting so much more complex themselves. Automation is now, in my eyes, and I know it's in the eyes of lots of people that are in the industry, automation testing is one of the number one things. Manual testing will always happen, but it should be more in the background. But I think we are getting there. These things are happening.
They're just waving to us. True.
It's like the lock police type thing.
Okay. Pretty lady.
Okay, so
I think Matt, how many materials?
It's perfect. Just you can wrap up easily.
Okay. Yeah. So this will be the end of the section 1 of the lake. Maybe we're gonna record something more on the island over the glass of wine. Hopefully nobody will complain about having a wine discussion about automation and other stuff. I don't know, I have a significant pleasure talking about the test automation with you, because that's simply pure pleasure, and I think we can talk about that for an hour. So yeah, thank you so much for this until this moment. And yeah, we're gonna see each other soon. Enjoy the views. Definitely recommend visiting Scotland and Loch Lomond.
Loch Lomond.
I'm too bad on my pronunciations. So anyway, thank you so much, and see you soon.
Thank you.